Good morning, everyone. So it's another cold Virginia morning. As you can see behind me, we have snow on the ground. We're going to dive into turbochargers today. Now, primarily, we're going to be talking about turbochargers that basically regulate themselves. Either they have an internal wastegate or they control boost by the size of their exhaust housing, the AR housing. So we're going to leave out things such as different styles of boost control solenoids, 2-port, 3-port, 4-port, standalone controllers, all that good stuff. Not really going to dive into that. We'll do a separate video on that. So early on, whenever we started seeing turbochargers really come around, boost and dry pressure were primarily controlled by the AR housing on the turbo. Basically, a larger AR housing will allow you to have lower dry pressures, and it will essentially make the turbo a little more laggy. What does that mean? Well, first off, non-wastegate turbos were extremely reliable. So reliable that you see guys taking modern turbochargers and replacing them, especially diesel guys. Doesn't matter if it's a Duramax, a 6.7 Power Stroke, a 6.7 Cummins. You guys love to go to non-wastegated turbos. The S300 and 400 series are extremely popular. S347s, 366s, whatever it might be. 347s, 367s, blah, 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 blah. You guys love them. They make really good power. They're stupid reliable. And guess what? There's plenty of H1C turbos and old 7.3 Power Strokes running around that have 250, 300, 400,000 miles on the original turbochargers. Why? Because they are so stupid simple. They are reliable and they make good power and they sound wonderful. Now, the drawbacks, as we discussed, is they can be a little bit laggy. Anybody that's driven a stock fueled, or especially an early, like a 95 to 97, 7.3 Power Stroke, anybody that's driven a early, we'll say an 89 or 90, 91-ish, Cummins will tell you that, especially without having the fuel turned up, those turbochargers can be a little bit laggy. They typically start making power somewhere between, I don't know, boost starts coming on maybe between 1,700 and 2,000 RPMs. It just depends on the application, transmission, gearing, and also for the 7.3 guys, they had like 5 different variants of that turbocharger on the 7.3. They had a California spec that had, I think, a little bit smaller AR housing. You had the Federal Emissions truck. I think in 97.5, they switched the turbocharger design a little bit. And then, of course, in 99 and the Super Duty, they changed it yet again. And there's probably other variants out there that I'm not aware of. So this is very situational, but in my experience, yes, they tend to be a little bit laggy. So the evolution of that was, of course, the wastegate. The addition to the wastegate is basically a door that is controlled by an actuator. Usually that actuator has some sort of boost reference source to it. And whenever the boost starts coming on, there's a diaphragm in there that overcomes that spring. The spring is what keeps it closed. As it comes on, it opens that wastegate door. It allows the boost to bypass the the exhaust dry pressure to bypass some of the turbocharger. It basically stops it from producing more boost or excessive dry pressure or overspeeding the turbo. Basically, if you didn't have that, you would continue to build boost and you would push the turbo past the surge line or way past its efficiency level. That's where a wastegate comes in handy. Essentially, it allows you to build boost faster, but still maintain that efficiency and keep that turbo in its operating range at a safe RPM. And we're not talking about engine RPM, we're talking about turbo RPM, which can be anywhere between 80,000 to 140,000 RPMs. They have a very, very wide range depending on the application of the turbocharger. Yes, that was 80,000 to 140,000. They get crazy speeds. So, for you 6.5 Detroit guys, you know very well that your factory boost control system sucked. In a lot of cases, especially as you got into the OBD2 trucks, you had a vacuum pump that basically controlled, fed a solenoid that would basically help that actuator stay closed and keep that wastegate closed, and it's prone to failure. So what a lot of guys do on those applications is they will actually completely remove the vacuum pump when it craps out. They'll remove the control solenoid, and they'll put basically just a mechanical spring on that wastegate. And this is the first style of wastegate we're really going to talk about, is the mechanical spring. So what it does is you have a spring, and as you tighten it down, There's usually a little threaded rod on there with usually 2 nuts and a jam nut and a washer. As you tighten it down, it compresses that spring. That spring makes more pressure. It helps keep that wastegate shut until boost starts coming out. And this is a very simple system. You don't see it a lot, except super common on the 6.5 Detroits for some reason, but it works. Now, typically what you're going to have is going back to that diaphragm style, which is when the boost starts coming in the diaphragm, it opens up. And you'll see this a lot on, once again, Duramaxes. LB7 Duramaxes were super common for this design. It's fairly reliable. There's not a whole lot to it. You can always put in some sort of boost control device in between there, whether it's a Fuller, whatever, and that'll, of course, help that turbocharger make more boost. Now, we're going to get into the next style, which is the electronically controlled solenoid. So basically you have that same turbo that still has that diaphragm on it. However, now we have some sort of solenoid that is in line coming from our boost reference off of our engine. Now on a diesel, once again, it may come directly off of the manifold. On a gas application, it's typically going to be past the throttle body. It could vary a lot, but either way, basically that line goes to the solenoid. Now, you have a set spring pressure inside that wastegate, and it might be 11 pounds or whatever. We'll just say 11 pounds to keep it a round number. What do we do if we want to make more pressure? We could take that solenoid and either restrict or vent some of that boost pressure going in so that our wastegate receives less boost pressure. This is really, really good and common on a lot of your 90s, even some of your 80s, and even into your 2000s vehicles. It's really good for controlling boost at lower RPMs or lower gears. And some of you Volkswagen guys, they were notorious for this. Audi guys, same thing, because of the traction control issues. You also see it a lot, SVO guys, Turbo Coupe Thunderbird guys. Yet again, another application where you'll typically see these. And basically all it is just fooling what that wastegate sees. It doesn't see the same pressure that's in the manifold. These are controlled by your ECU, and they have a lot of tunability because of that. This is kind of getting into the aftermarket side a little bit too, because it's very much how a 2 or 3 or 4 port works in the aftermarket world. Obviously the 3 and 4 ports, they have some different features. We're not going to dive into that, but it really does help you guys, especially when you start getting into your aftermarket standalone systems, whether that's a Profit B, whether it's a HKS, a Greddy, AEM, or even something like the Holley EFI systems for you LS guys. You could take an output source, run it to that solenoid off your ECU, and basically as that solenoid becomes energized, it pulses in there and allows you to control that boost level. It really comes in handy because you can control boost based off RPM, off speed, off gear, what gear you're in, basically. All of these different factors. In some cases, you can even tie it into traction control systems and things like that. So it can be really handy. At the end of the day, though, you're still set to that minimal amount of boost that's controlled by that spring pressure. So pretty much all that solenoid is doing is helping control your maximum boost. And it's really good because it also helps keep boost creep down, basically from the dry pressure overwhelming that spring and allowing that wastegate to open up sooner than you want it to open up, because that acts as a lag. So the final type that we're going to talk about today is going to be the VGT turbo. Guys, VGT turbos are a love-hate relationship. Basically, you have the fins, the vanes, inside of that turbocharger, inside the exhaust housing, and they open and close. So it allows the turbocharger to produce an awesome amount of response. It closes, it gives the turbocharger a really high dry pressure at lower RPMs, and as that dry pressure comes up, a dry pressure ratio would be a better way to state it. So it gives you a really high dry pressure ratio at lower RPMs. Helps bring that boost on sooner, and as the vanes open up, essentially it allows more of that exhaust gas to come through the system, lowers the drive pressure down, keeps it in a reasonable level, and keeps your boost at a safe operating range. These systems are extremely efficient. They're cutting edge. They ran off the ECUs on the vehicles they come on. So the downside is reliability and cost. VGT turbos are very expensive. They are typically very limited depending on the application, and they can be problem prone. Plenty of VGT turbos been replaced, 50, 60, 70,000 miles. There are some that have lasted 200, 300,000 miles. It really does vary a lot, and it can be something as stupid as a small piece of metal getting stuck in between the actuator, the terminal or pigtail at the actuator getting damaged. Something very minuscule that typically would not affect some of these other turbos can just totally wipe out a VGT turbo. And typically, depending on the application, if you're a diesel guy, you're probably looking at somewhere between like $2,500 just in parts to replace that turbocharger. Not awesome. The pros and cons are definitely there, and I suggest you research it in depth. They're not bad though. The fact is that they can make boost really soon. I mean, you can make, on my 6.7, I can make 20 pounds of boost at 1,600 RPMs. That would not have happened with a non-wastegated 7.3 turbo, unless I had some just stupid, ridiculous fueling, and it probably wouldn't be a daily drive or tow truck at that point. But just keep that in mind. Technology is a great thing, but sometimes it can be problem prone, and that's one of the reasons why you see so many guys switching out VGT turbos for the non-wastegated or fixed geometry turbos for that reason. So anyway, just keep that in mind. I do want to say, guys, right now things are crazy. Everybody's going through different stuff. Times are hard on a lot of people. COVID is definitely kicking a lot of people's asses. Please try to be nice to your neighbors. Be nice to people on the street, in the store. I know it's really hard to be patient with that guy that just cuts you off. You don't know what they're going through. Everybody's stressed right now. Just try to be a little nicer to everybody. It's crazy times we're living in. I'm not going to get political, but just be kind to everybody. Try to be a little bit nicer than you normally would be. But anyway, guys, hey, I really appreciate you watching this video. Sorry, I've kind of rambled on here, so we're going to cut it off. I hope this helps kind of explain a couple things about just basic turbos. We're going to do another video on internal versus external wastegates, and also we're going to break down some of those solenoid issues, but we'll get into that at a later time. Thank you for watching. Remember, like, share, subscribe if you like these. Be safe out there all the way.